Tonight, as you settle into the quiet sanctuary of this moment, you're about to embark on a profound journey into one of Buddhism's most liberating teachings. Not a journey across distant lands, but an inner voyage toward the deepest freedom possible, the art of letting go. As your breathing naturally slows and your body finds its perfect resting position, allow yourself to be transported to a place where ancient wisdom meets present moment awareness, where each breath becomes an opportunity to release what no longer serves you. Let go of the day's accumulated tensions. Release your grip on tomorrow's worries. For the next few hours, you'll discover what the Buddha called the ultimate happiness, the profound peace that comes from letting go of everything. Welcome to Sleepy Monk. Your journey into freedom begins now. You find yourself arriving at a remote mountain monastery as the morning mist begins to lift from ancient peaks. The wooden gate stands open, welcoming yet somehow knowing, as if it has witnessed countless souls seeking the same liberation you desire. Your journey here wasn't planned in the conventional sense. Something deeper called you to this place, a yearning for freedom from the countless things you've been carrying. Old hurts, future fears, the endless weight of trying to control what cannot be controlled. The path leading to the monastery winds through groves of ancient pine trees, their branches heavy with morning dew that catches the early sunlight like thousands of tiny diamonds. Each droplet will soon evaporate in the warming air, a perfect demonstration of impermanence that you're only beginning to recognize. The very ground beneath your feet speaks of letting go, fallen leaves returning to earth, dead branches making space for new growth, the endless cycle of release and renewal that governs all natural processes. As you pass through the entrance, a profound stillness embraces you, not the absence of sound, but the presence of deep peace. Monks move quietly along stone pathways worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, their steps unhurried, their faces serene with the particular tranquility that comes from having released attachment to outcomes. The air itself seems lighter here, infused with pine and morning dew, carrying the subtle fragrance of incense from the meditation hall where practitioners have been sitting since before dawn. The monastery buildings appear to grow naturally from the mountainside rather than being imposed upon it. Each structure demonstrates harmony with conditions rather than dominance over them. Roof lines that follow the slope of the land, materials that weather gracefully with seasons, designs that channel wind and water rather than fight against these natural forces. Even the architecture teaches letting go, showing how beauty emerges when human intention works with rather than against natural processes. Your guide appears almost silently, as if materializing from the morning mist itself. An elderly monk, whose eyes hold depths of understanding earned through decades of practice. His simple brown robes seem to flow with his movement rather than constrain it. Fabric worn soft through countless washings, patches repaired with stitches that speak of care rather than vanity. There's something about his presence that immediately communicates safety, as if he has mastered the art of holding space without grasping, of caring without clinging. "Welcome," he says, his voice carrying the warmth of someone who has found genuine contentment in the simple fact of being alive. "You've traveled far, seeking what you already possess, but cannot see, because your hands are too full to receive it. His words land with the gentle authority of truth, spoken without agenda, an invitation rather than instruction, wisdom offered freely without attachment to whether it's accepted or understood. He gestures toward a small pavilion overlooking the valley below, where wooden benches have been placed to take advantage of the spectacular morning view. Come, let us sit together. The teaching of letting go begins not with doing, but with being present to what is. As you follow him along the stone pathway, you notice how each step seems to settle something inside you, as if the very act of walking toward wisdom creates space for that wisdom to emerge. The pavilion commands a breathtaking view of the valley below, terraced fields that follow the natural contours of the land, a river that winds silver through the landscape, villages nestled into protective folds of earth and forest. Everything appears to be exactly where it belongs, nothing forced or out of harmony with the larger patterns. From this height, you can see how human activity has learned to work with geographical conditions rather than against them, creating beauty through cooperation rather than conquest. As you settle onto worn cushions facing the expansive view, you notice how naturally your shoulders drop, how your breathing deepens without effort. Perhaps this is already the beginning of release, allowing the body to find its natural state when not forced into unnatural holding patterns. The cushions themselves tell a story of countless practitioners who have sat here before you, each one seeking the same fundamental freedom from the burden of carrying what need not be carried. "Tell me," the monk says gently, his voice as soft as wind moving through pine branches, "what weighs most heavily on your heart? What are you holding on to that no longer serves your peace?" The question invites genuine reflection rather than quick answers, creating space for you to examine honestly the accumulation of concerns, regrets, and anxieties that have brought you to this mountain seeking release. You consider the layers of accumulation that have built up over years, regrets from decisions made or unmade, anxieties about uncertain futures that may never arrive, relationships that ended badly and whose pain you've been tending like a garden of sorrows, opportunities missed, and the elaborate stories you've created about what those missed chances mean about your worth or wisdom. The very consideration of these burdens makes you aware of how much energy goes into carrying them, like someone who has grown so accustomed to a heavy backpack that they've forgotten what it feels like to walk unencumbered. "I see," he nods with infinite compassion as you share what feels safe to express, his eyes holding your pain without trying to fix it or explain it away. The human heart is remarkably strong, capable of carrying enormous loads. But what we often forget is that strength also includes the wisdom to set down what we need, not carry. A breeze moves through the pine branches above, creating a soft rushing sound like a gentle exhale, as if the trees themselves are demonstrating the rhythm of holding and releasing that governs all healthy life. In Buddhism, we speak of attachment as the root of suffering. The monk continues, his words flowing like water over smooth stones, each syllable chosen with care and delivered without hurry. But attachment is often misunderstood in Western culture. It doesn't mean caring or loving. It doesn't mean being indifferent or disconnected from life. It means the desperate clinging that says, "This must be mine, This must last forever. This must go exactly as I demand. He picks up a fallen leaf from beside his cushion, examining it with gentle attention, as if seeing a leaf for the first time. The morning light illuminates its intricate structure, veins that once carried nutrients from root to branch, edges that show the subtle signs of seasonal change, colors that shift from green to gold to brown in nature's perfect demonstration of impermanence. "See how beautiful this leaf is," he asks, turning it slowly in his weathered fingers. "In a few weeks, it will complete its cycle and return to the earth, becoming soil that nourishes new growth. If I demanded it remain green forever, insisted it never change, clung to it desperately, and tried to preserve its current form, what would happen to my peace?" You watch as he holds the leaf lightly in his open palm, appreciating its present beauty without any attempt to prevent its natural progression toward decay and renewal. Then, with emotion so natural it seems inevitable, he allows it to drift away on the next breeze, watching its flight with the same peaceful attention he gave its presence. The simple gesture contains profound teaching: how to appreciate beauty without possessing it, how to love without smothering, how to care without controlling. "This is the first lesson of letting go," he explains, his gaze following the leaf as it settles somewhere among the garden paths below. "We can appreciate fully without grasping tightly. We can love completely without demanding ownership. We can care deeply without insisting that what we care about remain frozen in the form we currently prefer." His words settle into the peaceful morning air, like seeds finding fertile ground, simple truths that somehow contain the solution to countless forms of human suffering. The sun climbs higher now, warming your face and hands with the gentle heat that will soon evaporate the dew from grass and leaves, demonstrating once again the constant flow of change that characterizes all existence. Even this comfort, you realize, is temporary. Soon the light will shift, the temperature will change. This particular moment will pass into memory, never to be repeated exactly. Yet there's something deeply peaceful in recognizing the flowing nature of all experience, rather than fighting against it. Most suffering comes not from change itself, the monk observes, perhaps reading your thoughts or simply following the natural progression of the teaching, but from our resistance to change. We exhaust ourselves trying to make permanent what is naturally temporary, trying to control what functions best when allowed to unfold according to its own intelligence, trying to freeze moments that only become more precious when we appreciate their transient nature. A small bird lands on the pavilion's railing, regards you both with bright curiosity for a moment, then flies away to continue its morning activities. It didn't ask permission to arrive or apologize for leaving. It didn't cling to the pleasant perch or resist the call to move on. It simply moved naturally with conditions as they arose, demonstrating the effortless wisdom that animals possess instinctively. Animals and plants understand letting go intuitively, your teacher notes, watching the bird disappear among the trees. They don't cling to last season's form or demand guarantees about the next. They don't resist the natural cycles of growth and rest, abundance and scarcity, expansion and contraction. They flow with what is, moment by moment, trusting the intelligence that has sustained life for millions of years. We humans, with our powerful minds and elaborate thinking, have forgotten this natural wisdom. You think about your own patterns of holding on. The way you replay past conversations in endless mental loops, editing them as if that could somehow change what actually happened. The way you rehearse future scenarios over and over, trying to control outcomes through mental repetition and worry. The way you grasp at pleasant experiences, trying to make them last longer than their natural duration through memory and comparison. How much energy goes into these futile efforts to control the uncontrollable? Shall we walk together? The monk suggests, rising with the fluid grace of someone whose body has learned to move without fighting against itself. Sometimes movement helps the teachings settle more deeply than sitting alone. The body has its own wisdom about letting go that can teach the mind what words alone cannot convey. You rise and follow him along a path that winds through carefully tended gardens where the morning's teaching seems to continue through visual examples rather than verbal explanation. Unlike formal gardens that impose rigid geometric order on nature, these spaces seem to dance between cultivation and wildness. Plants grow in patterns that feel both intentional and organic, demonstrating perhaps another aspect of the letting go teachings: how to guide without forcing, how to shape without violence, how to create beauty through cooperation rather than domination. Vegetables grow alongside flowers in apparently random arrangements that somehow create perfect harmony. Useful herbs intermingle with purely decorative plants, and pathways curve to follow natural contours rather than forcing straight lines where the land suggests curves. These gardens were created by monks who understood the middle way, your guide explains as you walk slowly through the morning landscape, not abandoning all intention or care, which would lead to chaos, not forcing nature into unnatural forms, which would create ugliness and require constant maintenance, but working with natural tendencies toward beauty and balance. They learned to let go of rigid control while maintaining skillful intention. You pass sections where vegetables grow in raised beds that follow the slope of the land, capturing rainwater naturally rather than requiring artificial irrigation systems. Fruit trees have been pruned not into unnatural shapes, but in ways that encourage their natural tendency toward fruitfulness and health. Flowers bloom in succession throughout the growing season, not because they've been forced into artificial schedules, but because varieties have been chosen and planted to work with natural timing. This approach to gardening mirrors the approach to life that Buddhism teaches. The monk continues as you pause beside a section where herbs grow in what appears to be pleasant chaos, but reveals itself on closer inspection to be perfect organization, according to principles of companion planting and natural growth patterns. We learn to work skillfully with conditions as they are, rather than demanding they be different. We discover that letting go of rigid control often produces better results than forcing outcomes through will and effort. The path leads to a small pond, where lotus flowers float serenely on the dark water, their roots anchored in mud at the bottom, while their blossoms open to sunlight above the surface. Some flowers are fully opened, revealing their perfect pink and white centers to the morning air. Others remain tightly closed buds, waiting for exactly the right conditions to unfold. Still others are beginning to fade, their petals loosening and drifting onto the water's surface like natural confetti, celebrating the completion of their cycle. The lotus teaches the complete cycle of letting go, the monk says, kneeling beside the water's edge and inviting you to join him in closer observation of these perfect teachers. It releases attachment to staying closed when conditions call for opening. It allows itself to open fully when the time is right, holding nothing back from complete blooming. Then it gracefully releases attachment to perfect form as natural aging occurs, letting its petals fall without resistance or regret. He invites you to kneel beside him, to observe the flowers more closely and discover what they might teach about the art of release. In our human lives, we often resist these natural transitions. We cling to the safety of staying closed, even when conditions invite us to open our hearts. We hold back from full blooming out of fear that opening completely might lead to being hurt. We fight against the natural changes that come with aging, refusing to let go of previous versions of ourselves, even when that holding on creates suffering. A gentle wind stirs the water, causing the lotus leaves to sway and the flower petals to dance in the morning light. Everything moves in harmony with conditions, nothing fighting against the natural flow, nothing demanding that circumstances be different than they are. The water accepts the wind's touch without resistance. The leaves respond to the movement without complaint. The flowers continue their blooming and fading according to their own perfect timing. Let me share a teaching story about letting go, the monk says, as you both settle more comfortably beside the pond, watching the play of light and shadow on the water's surface. It concerns two monks traveling together who encounter circumstances that test their understanding of what it means to truly release attachment. His voice takes on the particular quality that indicates a teaching story is about to unfold, something to be received not just with the ears, but with the whole being. There once were two monks walking along a muddy road after heavy rains had made travel difficult. As they approached a swollen stream, they discovered a young woman in silk robes standing at the water's edge, clearly distressed about how to cross without ruining her expensive clothes. The older monk immediately approached her and said, "Please allow me to help you across." He picked her up and carried her safely to the other side, set her down gently, and continued walking with his companion. The monk pauses in his storytelling, allowing you to picture the scene, the muddy road, the swollen stream, the woman's distress, and the older monk's immediate response to a need he could meet. For the next several hours, the younger monk grew increasingly agitated. He walked faster and slower alternately, cleared his throat repeatedly, started to speak several times, then stopped. Finally, unable to contain himself any longer, he burst out. "How could you touch that woman? Our monastic vows strictly forbid physical contact with women. You've broken your promises, violated your training, compromised your spiritual purity." You can imagine the younger monk's internal struggle, his growing sense of righteousness mixed with confusion about his teacher's behavior, his need to voice what seemed like obvious criticism of a clear rule violation. The older monk stopped walking and turned to face his agitated companion with infinite patience and gentle amusement. "Brother," he said softly, "I set that woman down hours ago at the stream's edge. Why are you still carrying her?" The story's wisdom settles into awareness like ripples spreading across still water, each ring of understanding expanding to touch new areas of recognition. How often do you continue carrying experiences long after they're over? How much mental and emotional energy goes into holding on to things that have already ended, situations that are finished, conversations that cannot be changed through endless mental replay. The younger monk's suffering came not from what happened, your teacher explains, his voice gentle with compassion for the universal human tendency to create unnecessary burdens, but from his inability to let the moment pass naturally. He transformed a brief interaction into prolonged anguish through his clinging to judgment and rules over compassion and presence. He made himself miserable by refusing to release something that had already concluded. As you sit by the lotus pond, considering this teaching, you begin to recognize your own patterns of unnecessary carrying. Conversations from years ago that you replay and rehearse, editing them mentally as if you could somehow change what happened through enough repetition and analysis. Hurts from childhood that you tend like painful treasures, afraid that releasing them might somehow diminish their significance or excuse those who caused them. Worries about future events that may never occur, creating present suffering over imaginary problems that exist only in anxious imagination. Letting go doesn't mean not caring, the monk clarifies, perhaps sensing your internal process of recognition and the potential misunderstanding that might arise. It doesn't mean becoming indifferent to people or outcomes. It doesn't mean being passive in the face of injustice or failing to learn from experience. It means caring so deeply that you don't burden your love with desperate clinging. It means honoring what has been without demanding it last forever. It means opening to what is becoming without forcing it to match your preferences. The morning sun has reached its zenith now, creating dancing patterns of light on the pond's surface as small ripples catch and reflect the brightness. You watch as water striders move across the water with perfect confidence, supported not by swimming but by trusting in surface tension, allowing the water to hold them without breaking through. Their movement creates tiny circular ripples that expand outward before gradually disappearing. Another perfect metaphor for the teaching, how to move through life supported by trust rather than control, allowing reality to hold you without constantly testing whether the support will continue. "Are you hungry?" the monk asks as bells begin ringing across the monastery grounds, their clear tones carrying across the peaceful landscape like audible reminders of impermanence. Each sound arises from silence, exists briefly in the air, then returns to silence, perfectly demonstrating the cycle of appearance and dissolution that governs all phenomena. Eating mindfully provides another opportunity to practice letting go. We can appreciate each bite fully without clinging to the experience, allowing flavors to arise and pass naturally without trying to make them last longer than their inherent duration. He leads you toward the dining hall, where monks are gathering for the midday meal. The building itself embodies the same principles you've been observing throughout the monastery. Simple materials used skillfully, proportions that feel harmonious rather than imposing, spaces that invite rather than overwhelm. As you approach, you can hear the gentle sounds of preparation, dishes being arranged, mats being unrolled, quiet conversations as the community prepares to receive nourishment together. The dining hall embodies simplicity and grace in every detail. Low wooden tables, worn smooth by years of use. Individual place settings consisting of a single bowl. chopsticks wrapped in simple cloth, and a cup for tea. Monks take their places in orderly rows, their movements unhurried yet purposeful, demonstrating how efficiency and peacefulness can coexist when actions arise from presence rather than anxiety. There's no rushing toward food, no anxious claiming of seats or portions, no competitive energy around getting needs met. Everything flows with the natural rhythm of need being met without excess or deprivation. Before anyone begins eating, a period of profound silence settles over the hall like a gentle blanket, creating space for gratitude and mindfulness to emerge naturally. One monk near the front of the hall rises and recites a brief chant, expressing appreciation for the food and all the hands that brought it to this moment. The farmers who grew the vegetables, the earth that provided nutrients, the rain that watered the crops, the sun that powered photosynthesis, the countless beings whose work made this meal possible. This gratitude practice, your teacher whispers as the chant concludes and serving begins, helps us receive nourishment without entitlement, appreciate abundance without taking it for granted, acknowledge our interdependence without feeling burdened by it. When we truly understand how much cooperation is required for even the simplest meal, we naturally hold our food lightly while appreciating it deeply. The serving process unfolds with the same mindful attention that characterizes all monastery activities. Monks move through the aisles with large pots and ladles, offering portions to each person without favoritism or shortage. No one demands larger servings or complains about what's offered. Each person receives what is given with a small bow of acknowledgement, creating a continuous flow of offering and receiving that feels like a dance of mutual care. You receive your portion, simple steamed rice that gleams white in your bowl, seasonal vegetables prepared with minimal seasoning that allows their natural flavors to speak clearly, a small serving of miso soup whose aroma rises like incense from the dark broth. Nothing elaborate or exotic, yet when you take the first mindful bite, following the example of monks around you who eat with complete attention, the flavors seem extraordinarily vivid and satisfying. When we're not distracted by wanting the food to be different than it is, the monk explains quietly between careful bites, chewing slowly and completely before speaking, we can taste what's actually here rather than comparing it to other meals or wishing for different flavors. We can appreciate the rice for being perfectly rice, the vegetables for being exactly what they are, rather than demanding they be something else to satisfy our conditioned preferences. The practice of eating becomes a meditation in letting go, appreciating each bite fully while releasing it to make space for the next, not rushing toward the end of the meal or clinging to particularly pleasant flavors, just receiving each moment of nourishment with presence and gratitude. Around you, other monks eat in the same mindful manner, creating a collective field of awareness that supports your own practice without anyone speaking or directing attention to what others are doing. Notice how each bite naturally comes to an end, your teacher suggests, his voice barely above a whisper in the quiet hall. We don't have to force it to finish or make it last longer than it wants to. When we chew completely and swallow naturally, space automatically appears for the next bite. This is how letting go works in all aspects of life, not forcing release, but allowing natural completion, trusting the organic rhythm of beginning middle, and end that governs all healthy processes. The wisdom applies far beyond eating, you realize as you continue the meal with growing awareness of these natural cycles. How often do you try to force closure in relationships before they're ready to end naturally? How frequently do you demand immediate resolution of problems that need time to work themselves out? How much energy goes into rushing through experiences without allowing them to unfold at their natural pace, develop their full meaning, reach their organic conclusion? As the meal draws to its natural conclusion, signaled not by clocks or artificial schedules, but by the gradual completion of eating throughout the hall, each person cleans their bowl carefully with the final sip of tea and a piece of pickled vegetable provided for this purpose. Then they wipe their bowls spotless with the small cloth that accompanied their chopsticks, leaving no trace of the meal behind, while honoring what has been consumed through complete attention to the cleaning process. Nothing is wasted in this system, yet nothing is hoarded for later use. Each element serves its purpose completely, then transitions gracefully to the next phase of use. Bowls cleaned and ready for the next meal, cloths ready to be washed and used again, scraps composted to nourish the garden soil. This cleaning ritual demonstrates another aspect of letting go, the monk explains, as you follow the same process, discovering how satisfying it feels to complete each activity fully before moving to the next. We honor what has served us by completing it thoroughly, then release it cleanly for whatever comes next. We don't cling to the meal through leaving remnants in the bowl, but we also don't dismiss its value by cleaning carelessly. This middle way of complete engagement followed by clean release becomes a model for how to approach all of life's activities and relationships. After the meal, most monks disperse to afternoon activities with the same unhurried purposefulness that characterizes all their movements. Some to work in gardens where they tend vegetables and flowers with equal care. Others to workshops where simple furniture and tools are crafted with patient attention to both function and beauty. A few to meditation halls for personal practice that deepens understanding through direct experience rather than intellectual study alone. The rhythm feels organic rather than scheduled, as if each person naturally flows toward what the afternoon requires, without rigid adherence to imposed structure or artificial productivity demands. Even our daily schedule practices letting go, your teacher observes, as you watch the gentle dispersal of the community to various activities. We hold intentions lightly, allowing conditions to guide us toward appropriate response, rather than forcing predetermined plans regardless of changing circumstances. This doesn't mean being lazy or undisciplined, but rather being responsive to what actually serves the community's needs in each moment, rather than what we decided yesterday should happen today. He suggests a period of walking meditation through the monastery grounds, explaining that movement often reveals aspects of letting go that sitting meditation alone cannot teach. Walking offers perfect practice for letting go, he explains, as you begin moving slowly along stone pathways worn smooth by generations of practitioners. Each step requires releasing the previous step. We cannot move forward while clinging to where we've been. The body knows this instinctively, but when we bring conscious awareness to the process, it becomes a teacher of non-attachment. You walk in contemplative silence for a time, paying attention to the complex process of stepping that usually occurs far below conscious awareness. Lifting the foot requires letting go of contact with the ground. Moving it forward demands releasing attachment to the previous position. Placing it down involves trusting that the earth will provide support. Shifting weight requires faith that the body knows how to maintain balance through constant micro-adjustments. Each movement demonstrates letting go in action, yet feels completely natural and effortless when allowed to unfold according to its own wisdom. In meditation practice, the monk explains, as you continue the slow, mindful walking through gardens and courtyards, we discover that trying to hold on to peaceful states actually prevents peace from arising or continuing. The moment we grasp after tranquility, demand it continue exactly as it is, or create fear around its inevitable ending, we create the very agitation we seek to avoid. His words remind you of times when you've tried to force calmness through will and effort, becoming increasingly tense in the attempt to relax, creating the opposite of what you desired through the very struggle to control an uncontrollable process. The walking path circles through different areas of the monastery complex, each section offering its own teaching about working with conditions rather than against them. You pass workshops where monks craft simple furniture and tools, their movements efficient yet never hurried, focused completely on the task at hand without anxiety about completion times or results. The sound of planes shaping wood and hammers finding nails creates a gentle percussion that feels meditative rather than industrial. Work done with presence rather than mere productivity as the goal. Notice how the craftsmen work, your teacher suggests as you pause to observe a monk carefully sanding a wooden table leg, his attention completely absorbed in the texture of the wood under his hands. They're not fighting against the material or forcing it into unnatural shapes. They're discovering what each piece of wood wants to become and helping it express its natural beauty through skilled action guided by understanding rather than force. Further along the path, you encounter sections of garden devoted to medicinal herbs, rows of plants whose purposes transcend decoration or even nourishment, serving instead the healing arts that monastery infirmaries have practiced for centuries. Each herb grows according to its own requirements for soil, sunlight, and water, yet the overall arrangement creates harmony rather than chaos through understanding of how different plants can support rather than compete with each other. These herb gardens demonstrate another level of letting go, the monk explains, as you walk slowly between rows of aromatic plants whose scents blend into a complex symphony of healing fragrances. The gardeners have learned to work with each plant's individual nature rather than trying to make all plants grow in identical ways. They have released attachment to controlling every variable while maintaining skilled attention to what each species actually needs to thrive. You pass areas where clothes hang drying in mountain air, simple robes and work garments arranged on lines that follow the natural movement of wind rather than fighting against it. Even laundry becomes a teaching about cooperation with conditions, clothes positioned to catch breezes that will dry them efficiently, timing that works with weather patterns rather than demanding immediate results regardless of humidity or temperature. Simplicity naturally supports letting go, your teacher notes as you observe the minimal possessions hanging in the breeze. When we're surrounded by only what truly serves our well-being, there's less to cling to, less to defend against loss, less to fear being damaged or stolen. This doesn't mean living in deprivation, but rather discovering the difference between genuine needs and manufactured desires that create endless cycles of wanting and temporary satisfaction, followed by new wanting. You think about your own living situation, rooms filled with objects you rarely use but feel reluctant to release, clothes you never wear but can't quite donate, books you'll probably never read again but somehow believe you might need someday. How much energy goes into maintaining and protecting possessions that add little genuine value to daily life, while requiring constant attention to keep organized, clean, and secure? Attachment to objects is often attachment to identity, the monk observes, perhaps reading the direction of your thoughts, or simply following the natural progression of the teaching. We think our possessions define us, prove our worth to others, guarantee our security against uncertain futures. But identity based on accumulation is inherently insecure because things naturally decay, break, become obsolete, or lose their meaning as our interests and circumstances change. As afternoon progresses, you find yourself naturally settling into the monastery's peaceful rhythm. Time feels different here, not rushing toward future goals or dragging due to boredom, but flowing at the pace of present moment awareness, where each activity arises organically from conditions rather than artificial schedules. Activities emerge naturally, are completed mindfully with appropriate attention, then transition smoothly to whatever follows, without attachment to continuing previous tasks or anxiety about upcoming responsibilities. Nothing is forced in this environment, yet nothing feels neglected or incomplete. Gardens receive exactly the care they need without overcultivation that would disturb natural processes. Buildings are maintained appropriately without obsessive perfection that would create anxiety about inevitable wear and weathering. People engage in conversation when it serves connection without compulsive socializing that avoids solitude, and they embrace silence when it supports contemplation without antisocial withdrawal from community engagement. The walking meditation concludes at a small meditation garden where stone sculptures create focal points among carefully arranged plants and flowers that bloom in succession throughout the growing season. Unlike museums where art is protected behind barriers and viewed from prescribed distances, these sculptures are integrated into living landscape, weathered by rain and sun, gradually returning to the earth that formed them while serving their function as objects of contemplation. These sculptures teach impermanence beautifully, your guide says, as you both settle on a stone bench facing a carved Buddha whose features have been softened by decades of mountain weather. Moss has grown in protected crevices where rain collects and lingers, creating patterns of green that change with seasons. The overall form remains recognizable and inspiring, yet details have evolved through patient weathering that has enhanced, rather than diminished, the statue's serene expression. The sculptor understood that his work would change over time, the monk explains, running his fingers along stone surfaces that feel warm from afternoon sunlight. Rather than fighting natural processes through protective coatings or indoor installation, he chose materials and placement that would age gracefully, becoming more beautiful through acceptance of impermanence rather than despite it. The statue demonstrates what we can learn about our own aging, how to allow time to soften our sharp edges while maintaining essential dignity and purpose. You observe how rain has created subtle channels in the stone that guide water away from the face, while creating interesting patterns that add to, rather than detract from, the sculpture's beauty. Wind has polished surfaces that receive regular exposure while leaving textured areas in protected spaces, creating visual interest through natural processes rather than artificial techniques. Even bird droppings have been incorporated into the overall aesthetic, bleaching certain areas, white in patterns that suggest clouds or flowing fabric. Human beauty works similarly, the monk continues, his own face showing lines earned through years of smiling and concentrating, hair silvered by time, yet somehow more distinguished than artificial attempts to maintain youthful appearance. When we fight against aging, demanding that bodies remain unchanged, refusing to accept the natural evolution of physical form, we create suffering through resistance to inevitable processes. When we learn to appreciate beauty's temporal nature, allow ourselves to age gracefully, find meaning appropriate to each life stage, we discover deeper beauty than surface appearances ever provided. This perspective challenges cultural messages about clinging to youth, fighting against natural aging processes, defining self-worth through unchanging physical attributes maintained through artificial means. What if aging could be embraced as another form of letting go, releasing attachment to previous versions of yourself, while opening to whatever wisdom and beauty each life stage offers, when approached with acceptance rather than resistance? As the afternoon sun begins its descent toward western peaks, casting longer shadows that emphasize the contours and textures of the garden landscape, your teacher suggests returning to the main monastery buildings for the evening's more intensive practice session. Tonight, he says, as you rise from the contemplative bench and begin walking toward the meditation hall, we'll explore letting go through formal meditation practice. Some forms of release happen naturally through understanding and environmental support. Others require patient, gentle cultivation over time through deliberate practice that trains the mind in new patterns of relating to experience. The meditation hall stands at the heart of the monastery complex, its high ceiling and paper windows creating a space that feels both intimate and expansive, personal yet universal, conducive to individual contemplation while supporting collective practice. Late afternoon light filters through the translucent panels, casting everything in a soft, golden glow that seems to slow time itself, creating an atmosphere where minutes might expand into hours, or hours might pass like moments. Monks are already gathering for the afternoon practice session, taking cushions from neatly arranged stacks and finding their preferred spots for sitting without assigned seating or territorial claiming. Their movements are deliberate yet relaxed, like people who have learned to inhabit their bodies without forcing them into unnatural positions or creating unnecessary tension through self-consciousness about appearance or performance. Your teacher guides you to a cushion near the wall where you can observe the community practice, while developing your own understanding of letting go through direct experience rather than intellectual discussion alone. Meditation, he explains as you arrange yourself in a position that balances alertness with comfort, is perhaps our most direct training in non-attachment. We learn to observe thoughts and emotions without being controlled by them, to witness the constant flow of experience without grasping after pleasant states or pushing away difficult ones. The hall gradually fills with practitioners taking their places in orderly rows, that form naturally without direction or enforcement. There's no assigned seating arrangement, yet everyone seems to find their natural spot without conflict or confusion, demonstrating how appropriate order can emerge organically when everyone acts with consideration for the whole, rather than selfish claiming of preferred positions. Once all are settled, their postures established, and a natural quiet has descended over the assembled group. A profound stillness settles over the space, like morning mist finding its resting place in mountain valleys. Not the stillness of forced suppression, where thoughts and feelings are pushed down through will, but the natural quiet that arises when minds are gathered and focused, like individual streams flowing into a common river. Your teacher speaks just loudly enough for everyone to hear, his voice like a gentle stream flowing over smooth stones, each word chosen with care and delivered without hurry or emphasis that would create tension or performance anxiety. Today, we practice the meditation of letting go, he begins. The phrase itself seeming to create space around whatever mental activity might be occurring. Begin by establishing awareness of your breath, not controlling the rhythm or trying to improve it, just observing the natural flow of inhalation and exhalation as it occurs in this moment. You close your eyes and bring attention to breathing, immediately noticing how the mind automatically wants to improve or adjust the natural rhythm. Even this simple instruction reveals deeply ingrained attachment patterns. The desire to breathe more deeply than feels natural, more slowly than the body currently prefers, more smoothly than whatever slight irregularities might be present. The urge to be a good breather rather than simply allowing breathing to be exactly as it is demonstrates how pervasive the controlling tendency has become. Notice any urge to control your breath, the monk guides, as if reading the common struggle that arises when meditation students first encounter the difference between awareness and management. See if you can appreciate breathing exactly as it is in this moment, without needing it to be different, deeper, slower, or more perfect than what's naturally occurring. Your breath has been sustaining you successfully throughout your entire life without conscious management. This proves more challenging than expected, revealing how habitual the improvement impulse has become. The breath seems too shallow for proper meditation, too fast for spiritual practice, not rhythmic enough for the peaceful state you imagine should accompany this activity. Yet, each attempt to enhance or correct natural breathing makes the process more forced and less satisfying, creating tension where ease should develop. Perhaps this is already the core teaching about letting go, how attempts to control natural processes often create the very problems they seek to solve, how the mind's constant improvement project can interfere with the inherent wisdom that operates perfectly when left alone. Let your breath breathe itself, your teacher suggests, the phrase pointing toward a radical shift from doing to allowing, from managing to trusting. Gradually, through repeated, gentle, returning to simple observation, whenever control impulses arise, you begin to stop trying to be a good breather and simply observe breathing as it naturally occurs in each moment. Sometimes the inhalation is deep, sometimes shallow, sometimes smooth, sometimes slightly irregular, all of it perfect in its naturalness, requiring no improvement or management from your well-meaning but ultimately interfering conscious mind. This is the first layer of letting go, the monk explains, after several minutes of allowing this basic settling to occur, releasing the need to improve, manage, or perfect natural processes that function beautifully without our interference. Learning to trust the wisdom that has been operating successfully since your birth, that continues working even when you sleep, that requires no conscious supervision to sustain your life moment by moment. Now expand your awareness to include bodily sensations, he continues, guiding attention to encompass a wider field of present moment experience. Notice areas of comfort or discomfort without immediately trying to adjust your position. Can you be present with physical sensation exactly as it is, without needing it to change before you can be peaceful with it? You scan through your body, discovering various experiences that usually remain below conscious awareness. Pressure, where you contact the cushion, slight warmth where sunlight touches your face through windows, coolness where air circulates around your hands. The instruction challenges habitual patterns of immediately shifting when uncomfortable, constantly adjusting position to maintain perfect physical ease, never quite settling because some small discomfort always suggests that a different position might be better. Instead, you practice being present with sensation as it is, neither amplifying discomfort through resistance and story-making, nor immediately escaping it through movement that prevents deeper settling. Physical sensations arise and pass according to conditions, your teacher explains, his voice maintaining the same gentle, unhurried quality that supports contemplation, rather than creating pressure to understand or achieve particular results. When we stop fighting against temporary discomfort, stop demanding that our physical experience always be pleasant and comfortable, we often discover that sensations change naturally without our intervention. Indeed, as you observe a slight ache in your lower back, with curiosity rather than resistance, it seems to shift and soften on its own, not disappearing completely, but losing the urgency that made it seem intolerable. The sensation becomes just another element of present moment experience, rather than a problem requiring immediate solution, demonstrating how much of what we call suffering might be resistance to natural sensation, rather than the sensation itself. This is the second layer of letting go, the monk notes after allowing time for this exploration. Releasing the demand that our physical experience always be pleasant and comfortable, learning to be present with the body as it actually is, rather than as we think it should be, for us to be happy or peaceful. Next, bring awareness to your emotional state, he guides, inviting attention to an even more subtle and usually less conscious aspect of moment-to-moment experience. What feelings are present right now? Can you observe them without judgment, without needing them to be other than they are? Can you be curious about emotions, rather than immediately trying to fix or escape them? You discover a mixture of emotional tones that shift and blend like colors in water. Curiosity about these new practices mixed with slight anxiety about doing them correctly. Appreciation for the peaceful environment combined with subtle restlessness about sitting still for extended periods. Gratitude for this learning opportunity, alongside mild concern about responsibilities waiting at home. The instruction to observe emotions without changing them reveals how automatically you try to adjust your internal weather, pushing away discomfort while trying to amplify pleasant feelings, creating elaborate mental stories about why you feel as you do, and what these feelings mean about your progress or worthiness. Even the simple act of naming emotions seems to change them, as if awareness itself is a gentle transformer of whatever it touches with patient attention. Emotions are like weather, your teacher explains, the metaphor immediately clarifying what might otherwise remain confusing or overwhelming. They arise due to various conditions, both internal and external, exist for a time while serving whatever function they serve, then naturally transform as conditions change. We create suffering when we demand sunny emotional skies at all times, or refuse to allow natural storms to pass through our inner landscape without resistance. You practice observing the emotional weather system with the same neutral awareness brought to breath and body, noticing what's present without immediately trying to fix, improve, or escape it. This creates an unexpected spaciousness around feelings, as if they're meteorological phenomena moving through a vast sky, rather than solid realities defining your identity or requiring immediate action to resolve. This is the third layer of letting go, the monk continues, after several minutes of allowing this emotional observation to deepen. Releasing identification with temporary emotional states, recognizing them as passing experiences rather than permanent truths about who you are or what your life means. Learning to be the sky in which all weather occurs, rather than thinking you are the weather itself. Finally, observe your thoughts themselves, he instructs, pointing attention toward perhaps the most challenging aspect of letting go practice. Watch how they arise in consciousness, exist briefly while serving whatever purpose they serve, then dissolve to make space for new thoughts. Can you witness thinking without being controlled by the stories thoughts create? Can you see thoughts as events occurring in awareness rather than as truth requiring belief or action? This proves the most difficult layer of practice, requiring the most gentle persistence to develop any stability or skill. Thoughts seem so compelling, so important, so true and urgent. They create elaborate narratives about your meditation practice, judging your progress or lack thereof, planning future activities, replaying past conversations, analyzing the teaching, comparing this experience to other spiritual practices you've encountered, worrying about whether you're wasting time or making progress. Yet with patient observation that neither suppresses thoughts nor follows them into their elaborate storylines, you begin to notice that mental activity arises and passes according to its own rhythm, much like breathing or weather patterns. You don't create thoughts through conscious intention, nor can you stop them through will or determination. They appear from unknown sources, exist temporarily while using whatever mental energy you give them, then naturally dissolve unless fed with additional attention and elaboration. Thoughts are not the thinker, your teacher explains, the statement pointing toward a fundamental shift in self-understanding that might take years to fully comprehend. They are phenomena arising in consciousness, no more substantial than clouds forming and dissolving in an empty sky, no more permanent than waves appearing and disappearing on the surface of an ocean that remains fundamentally undisturbed by whatever temporary forms arise within it. This perspective radically shifts your relationship with mental activity from identification to observation, from being the author and defender of every thought to becoming the aware space in which thinking occurs. Thoughts lose their compelling urgency when seen as temporary mental weather, rather than absolute truths requiring immediate action or defense, like watching a movie, rather than being completely absorbed as if the drama were happening to you personally. This is the deepest layer of letting go we can explore through meditation, the monk concludes, after allowing extended time for this most subtle form of practice. Releasing identification with the mind's constant commentary, recognizing our true nature as the awareness in which all experience arises and passes, learning to rest in the spacious knowing that remains constant, while all contents of experience change. The meditation continues in collective silence, each person following their own rhythm of exploration while supported by the group's shared commitment to practice. The silence feels alive and supportive rather than empty or isolating, as if individual efforts to let go contribute to a field of understanding that benefits everyone present without anyone needing to understand exactly how this mutual support operates. Time seems to flow differently in this deep shared practice, minutes expanding into spacious present moments, while extended periods pass without the usual sense of duration or impatience for something else to happen. The letting go instruction works at levels deeper than conscious effort, allowing natural release to occur when conditions are supportive, rather than trying to force outcomes through spiritual ambition or meditation performance. After what might be 30 minutes or might be an hour, temporal measurement becoming irrelevant in the timeless quality of present moment awareness, 3 soft bell strikes signal the session's formal conclusion. The sound seems to emerge from and return to silence, like a perfect demonstration of appearance and dissolution, arising without effort and fading without resistance, leaving no trace except the natural transition back toward ordinary consciousness. The hall remains quiet as practitioners gradually shift from formal meditation to everyday awareness, taking time to honor the transition rather than immediately jumping back into activity and conversation. There's a palpable sense of collective settling, as if the shared practice of letting go has harmonized the group's energy, despite each person following their own inner journey of release and discovery. Take your time returning, your teacher suggests, in a voice even softer than during the meditation instruction, honoring the delicate quality of consciousness emerging from deep practice. Notice if you can maintain some quality of letting go as you transition back to ordinary activity. Can you move your body without forcing it into immediate alertness? Can you open your eyes without demanding particular visual experiences? Can you rise from sitting without making the transition more effortful than necessary? You follow his suggestions for transitioning from meditation to ordinary awareness, discovering how even simple movements can become opportunities to practice non-attachment when approached with the same quality of letting go cultivated during formal sitting. Instead of immediately forcing alertness through rapid movement or demanding instant clarity through wide open eyes, you allow the return to happen gradually and naturally, like dawn slowly brightening rather than electric lights suddenly illuminating. Eyes open softly rather than snapping to attention, receiving whatever visual information arises without immediately categorizing or judging what you see. The body unfolds from sitting position according to its own timing rather than imposed urgency, muscles stretching naturally as circulation adjusts without forcing rapid transitions that might create unnecessary tension or discomfort. As monks begin quietly leaving the hall, their movements maintaining the same quality of presence that characterized the meditation itself. Your teacher invites you to remain for a few minutes longer to process the experience while the insights remain fresh and accessible. "How was that practice for you?" he asks with genuine interest that creates space for honest reflection rather than expected positive responses. You consider how to describe something so subtle yet significant, the gradual releasing of control over breathing, body, emotions, and thoughts. The spaciousness that emerged around experience when you stopped trying to manage every aspect of what arose. The discovery that you could observe mental and emotional activity without being completely identified with every thought and feeling that appeared in consciousness. Many people expect letting go to feel like dramatic release, he notes after you share your reflections, nodding with understanding born from years of guiding students through similar discoveries. Like finally dropping a heavy burden you've carried for years, creating sudden relief and permanent transformation. Sometimes it does manifest that way, particularly when we release major attachments that have been creating significant suffering. His weathered hands rest peacefully in his lap as he continues, demonstrating the embodied quality of someone who has learned to hold even teaching lightly. But often, letting go is more like what you just experienced. A gentle settling, a softening of grip, a recognition that you were holding onto things more tightly than necessary. Like unclenching a fist you didn't realize was closed, or releasing tension in shoulders you didn't know were raised. This description matches your experience more accurately than expectations of sudden liberation or dramatic transformation that sometimes accompany spiritual practice. The letting go felt more like discovering natural ease than achieving some special state, more like remembering how to relax than learning something completely foreign to your experience. Evening light has grown golden and long during the meditation session, casting the hall in increasingly warm, amber tones that seem to slow time even further than the sitting practice already accomplished. Through the paper windows, you can see the first evening stars appearing in the deepening sky, pinpricks of light that have traveled vast distances to reach your awareness in precisely this moment. "Let's step outside," your teacher suggests, rising with the fluid grace of someone whose movement has been refined through decades of mindful attention to how bodies naturally want to move when not forced or hurried. Evening air often helps integration after intensive meditation practice, and there's something about twilight that naturally supports the letting go teachings. The monastery courtyard feels different in evening light than it did during the busy activity of daytime hours. Pathways that seemed practical and straightforward now appear mysterious and inviting. Stone surfaces that looked merely functional during daylight now seem to glow with their own inner luminescence. Lanterns have been lit along the main walkways, creating pools of warm illumination that guide movement without overwhelming the natural darkness. Darkness teaches letting go naturally, the monk observes as you walk together slowly through the transformed courtyard, your steps slower and more deliberate in the reduced visibility. We cannot control what we cannot see clearly. We must trust our feet to find solid ground, rely on available light to guide the next step, release anxiety about obstacles that may or may not exist in shadows beyond our current vision. This evening walk becomes another form of meditation in letting go, releasing the visual control that's available during full daylight, trusting the body's natural wisdom to navigate changing terrain, finding guidance in whatever illumination is available without demanding complete clarity about the entire path ahead. Your feet seem to know how to find stable placement on uneven stones. Your balance adjusts automatically to subtle changes in surface level. Life often requires this same trust, your teacher explains. As you navigate a section where the path curves around a garden bed, the route invisible until each step reveals the next portion of safe ground. We rarely have complete information about what lies ahead in our personal journeys. We must learn to move forward with whatever guidance is available, while releasing attachment to knowing everything in advance, controlling every outcome, seeing every potential obstacle before it appears. The path leads to a section of the monastery you haven't visited before, a small cemetery where simple stone markers note the passing of monks who lived and practiced here across multiple generations. Unlike elaborate monuments designed to demand permanent remembrance or impressive mausoleums that fight against natural decay, these markers are modest and weathered, some so old that inscriptions have been softened by decades of rain and sun until only basic shapes remain visible. Fresh flowers have been placed on some graves, while others are naturally adorned with fallen leaves and growing moss that create their own form of seasonal decoration. A few markers have small offerings, smooth stones arranged in simple patterns, pieces of fruit that birds will eventually consume, cups of water that will evaporate back into the cycle of earth and sky. This place teaches perhaps the ultimate letting go, your teacher says, as you walk slowly among the peaceful grave markers, each one representing someone who faced the final release that comes to every living being. Every person commemorated here confronted the same challenge we all must eventually meet. Letting go of life itself, of this body that has carried us through decades of experiences, of all accumulated identity and possessions and relationships that seem so important during our time of holding them. The atmosphere feels contemplative rather than morbid, peaceful rather than frightening, infused with the same quality of acceptance that characterizes all monastery spaces. Perhaps this is because death is approached here as teacher rather than enemy, as natural transition rather than terrible failure, as the completion of letting go practice rather than its ultimate defeat. In Buddhism, we practice dying before death comes. The monk continues as you pause before one marker that bears only a name and dates, with a small carved lotus flower below the inscription. We cultivate the ability to release attachment to everything we think defines us, discovering what remains when all identifications are gradually released through practice, rather than waiting for death to force the final letting go upon us. You consider what it might mean to practice dying while fully alive, releasing attachment to being right in arguments, letting go of needing others to understand or approve of your choices, gradually loosening the grip on possessions and positions, and even personality traits that you've used to construct a sense of solid identity. What would remain if all these external supports were gently released? Brother Chen lived here for 60 years, your teacher explains, noting your attention to the particular marker with the lotus carving. He taught many students the art of letting go through his example of how to age and eventually die with grace and curiosity rather than resistance and terror. Even during his final illness, he remained interested in what the dying process might teach him, rather than clinging desperately to remaining alive at any cost. This perspective on death as potential teacher rather than absolute enemy challenges cultural conditioning that views dying as the ultimate failure or tragedy to be avoided through any means necessary. What if death, like all experiences, could be met with awareness and acceptance rather than resistance and terror? What if the dying process, when approached consciously, might offer teachings unavailable through any other means? We practice letting go in small ways throughout life, the monk continues as you walk slowly among the peaceful graves, some so old their markers have become part of the landscape through moss growth and subtle sinking into earth. So that when the ultimate letting go is required, we approach it with familiarity rather than complete panic. Each time we release attachment to having things be different than they are, we prepare for the final acceptance that comes to everyone. The evening cemetery visit creates an unexpectedly tranquil rather than disturbing effect, perhaps because it's approached as spiritual teaching rather than morbid entertainment, contemplation of natural cycles, rather than voyeuristic fascination with mortality. The presence of death as constant background reality somehow makes life more precious rather than less meaningful, more worthy of appreciation rather than something to be taken for granted. Death awareness can be one of our greatest teachers, your guide explains as you complete the circuit through the cemetery and begin walking back toward the main monastery complex. When we truly understand that this body, this personality, this entire accumulation of memories and preferences and accumulated experience is temporary, we naturally hold it all more lightly. We appreciate more fully while clinging less desperately. Returning to the monastery's living areas, you encounter other monks engaged in quiet evening activities, some sitting in small groups for gentle conversation that flows at the pace of natural speech rather than rushed communication, others reading by lamplight with the focused attention of people who value wisdom over entertainment. A few practicing calligraphy with careful strokes that demonstrate how ordinary activities can become forms of meditation when approached with presence and respect for the materials. Everything moves at the unhurried pace of people who have released attachment to filling every moment with productive activity or stimulating input. Conversations arise organically when there's something worth sharing. Continue as long as they serve genuine connection, then conclude naturally without forcing artificial closure or avoiding natural endings. Reading happens at whatever speed allows complete absorption rather than rushing toward completion or comparison with other books. Even our evening leisure practices letting go, your teacher observes, as you walk through areas where monks engage in various quiet activities without any sense of schedule pressure or performance anxiety. We participate in activities for their own inherent value rather than demanding they produce specific results or lead somewhere else. We read for the pleasure of reading rather than to finish books. We converse for the joy of human connection rather than to accomplish particular outcomes. He suggests joining him for evening tea in a small room that overlooks the monastery garden, now transformed by darkness and lantern light into something that seems more magical than the practical growing space it appeared to be during daylight hours. The tea ceremony itself becomes a meditation in letting go, receiving each cup with gratitude rather than entitlement, appreciating each sip fully without trying to make the experience last longer than its natural duration, allowing the tea to cool and the evening to progress without attempting to control the pace of either process. The simple green tea, served without sugar or milk or any additions that might mask its natural character, provides another opportunity to practice acceptance of what is, rather than demanding that experience be modified to meet conditioned preferences. The slight bitterness becomes interesting rather than unpleasant. When met with curious attention, the earthy undertones reveal complexity that goes unnoticed when drinking is merely functional rather than contemplative. Tomorrow, the monk explains as you both sip the cooling tea and watch evening settle over the garden below, we will explore how letting go transforms our relationships with other people. Often, our deepest attachments involve how we think others should behave, what we believe they owe us for our care and attention, or what we imagine we need from them to be happy and secure. This touches something tender and immediately recognizable. The ways you've suffered when people didn't meet your expectations or fulfill what seemed like reasonable needs, when they changed in directions you couldn't understand or support, when they withheld appreciation or affection or cooperation that you believed your actions had earned. How much relationship conflict stems from these hidden demands and unspoken contracts. Relationships provide our most intensive training in letting go, he continues, the tea's warmth spreading through your chest as you consider the truth of this observation. Because we cannot control other people, no matter how much we might want to or think we know what's best for them. We cannot make them love us through being perfect, cannot force them to change through criticism or withdraw love, cannot guarantee they'll remain the same through our preference for predictability. The tea ceremony continues in comfortable silence, each sip an opportunity to practice the principles you've been exploring, receiving what's offered without demands for it to be different, appreciating present experience without clinging to make it permanent, allowing natural changes in temperature and flavor without resistance to these inevitable transformations. As evening deepens into night, and the tea naturally cools beyond the temperature where drinking remains pleasant, your teacher suggests preparing for sleep. Rest itself is a profound form of letting go, he explains, as you both rise from the small table and prepare to conclude the day's intensive learning. We release conscious control over experience, allow the body to restore itself through processes we neither understand nor manage, trust that unconsciousness will be safe, and that will return to awareness refreshed, rather than diminished by the temporary dissolution of ordinary identity. This reframes sleep as spiritual practice, rather than mere biological necessity. Another daily opportunity to practice non-attachment by releasing the need to control or monitor every aspect of experience, trusting natural wisdom to provide whatever restoration the body and mind require without conscious supervision or improvement efforts. He guides you back to the simple guest quarters, where your sleeping mat has been prepared with clean linens and a small pillow that provides just enough support without excessive comfort that might create attachment to luxury or special conditions. The room contains only what is necessary for rest, nothing excessive to distract attention from the primary purpose, nothing missing that would create discomfort or prevent natural sleep. Before sleeping, he suggests, as you prepare for what will be your final night at the monastery, practice releasing the entire day. Allow your mind to settle naturally without forcing it to become quiet through effort or technique. Let your body find its most comfortable position without demanding perfect ease or ideal conditions. Release any expectations about how sleep should occur and trust your natural wisdom to provide appropriate rest. You prepare for sleep following his guidance, noticing how different this approach feels from usual bedtime routines that often focus on trying to force relaxation through various techniques, or becoming anxious when sleep doesn't arrive according to preferred schedules. Instead, you simply allow the day to complete itself naturally, while trusting that sleep will arise when conditions are appropriate, neither rushing toward unconsciousness nor fighting against whatever level of wakefulness feels natural. The monastery bells ring softly in the distance, their clear tones marking the transition from evening activities to nighttime rest, with the same natural rhythm that governs all healthy cycles. Even these sounds seem to encourage letting go, releasing attachment to staying awake and engaged, allowing consciousness to transform naturally into whatever state sleep provides, trusting the ancient rhythms that have sustained life through countless generations. Sleep comes more easily than expected, perhaps because you're not trying to make it happen through mental effort or becoming frustrated when immediate unconsciousness doesn't arrive on demand. Dreams, when they arise, seem lighter and less compelling than usual, as if the day's practice of letting go has reduced the mind's tendency to create elaborate dramas, even during sleep states that normally operate below conscious awareness. The quality of rest feels genuinely restorative, rather than being interrupted by the usual unconscious struggles with unresolved daytime issues or anxiety about upcoming responsibilities. Even sleeping becomes another form of letting go practice when approached as natural process, rather than performance to be evaluated or controlled. Morning arrives with the familiar sound of monastery bells and the gradual lightening of sky visible through your simple window, natural awakening that allows consciousness to return gradually rather than demanding immediate alertness through artificial alarm systems. Unlike jarring mechanical sounds that create stress through sudden transition demands, this organic awakening supports natural cycles of rest and activity. You lie still for a few moments upon waking, appreciating the transition from sleep to wakefulness, without immediately jumping into activity or mental planning about the day ahead. The simple practice of conscious awakening becomes another opportunity to notice how natural processes unfold perfectly when not rushed or managed through excessive effort or artificial stimulation. Your teacher appears after you've had time to wash and arrange yourself for the morning, his face carrying the particular serenity that comes from years of practicing what he teaches rather than merely understanding the concepts intellectually. "How did you sleep?" he asks with genuine interest that creates space for honest reflection rather than expected positive responses. You reflect on the night's rest, noting how differently you approached sleep when not trying to control the process or evaluate your success at relaxation. Dreams seemed less intense and emotionally involving, more like films you observed rather than experiences you lived through with complete identification. Perhaps letting go during waking hours naturally extends to sleeping states as well, reducing the unconscious struggle that often makes rest less restorative than it could be. "Good," he nods approvingly at your description. "Sleep provides one of our most natural teachers of letting go. We cannot remain conscious through willpower alone, cannot direct dreams through control or effort, cannot prevent the temporary dissolution of waking identity that occurs each night. Every sleep cycle offers practice in dying and being reborn, in trusting processes beyond conscious management, in releasing attachment to continuous awareness. This perspective transforms sleep from unconscious necessity into conscious spiritual practice. Another daily opportunity to develop trust in natural wisdom, while releasing the ego's demand to supervise and control every aspect of experience. Each night becomes preparation for the ultimate letting go, while providing immediate benefits through improved rest quality. The morning follows the monastery's established rhythm: simple breakfast, eaten with the same mindful attention practiced during previous meals, brief periods of work that contribute to the community's collective needs, without individual ego investment in personal achievement, gradual preparation for the day's final teachings before your departure back to ordinary life. After completing these morning activities, your teacher suggests walking to a different section of monastery grounds for today's culminating explorations. This morning, he explains, as you follow a path leading upward into the forest above the main buildings, we'll investigate how to maintain the understanding of letting go when you return to more complex and challenging conditions than what this protected environment provides. The forest path climbs steadily but gently, winding between ancient pines and occasional clearings where wildflowers grow in natural arrangements that demonstrate beauty emerging from unforced conditions. Morning light filters through the canopy in constantly shifting patterns as branches move with subtle breezes, creating a visual meditation on impermanence and change that supports the day's teachings without requiring verbal explanation. Everything in this forest environment demonstrates the natural wisdom of holding firm to essentials while remaining flexible about details. Trees with deep roots that anchor them securely, yet branches that bend with storms rather than breaking through rigid resistance. Plants that adapt to available light and moisture while maintaining their essential nature. Ecological relationships that shift with seasons while preserving overall balance and health. The transition from monastery simplicity to ordinary complexity presents its own challenges, your teacher acknowledges, as you climb the peaceful forest path, surrounded by demonstrations of how to live with conditions rather than against them. Here, you've been supported by environment, community, and schedule that all encourage letting go practice. At home, you'll face pressures and distractions that often support attachment and clinging rather than release and acceptance. This recognition feels both realistic and slightly daunting. How to preserve insights gained in this supportive environment when returning to situations that trigger strong emotional reactions, demand rapid decisions, involve people who haven't shared this understanding of letting go, operate according to cultural values that emphasize acquisition rather than release. The key is starting small and being patient with the process, your teacher advises, as the path opens into a clearing where fallen logs provide natural seating for rest and conversation. Don't expect to let go of everything immediately upon your return. Begin with minor attachments, preferences about weather that you cannot control, opinions about how other people should dress or behave in public, demands that every small plan proceed exactly as expected, without any spontaneous changes. You settle on one of the sun-warmed logs, appreciating how perfectly it serves as seating without any human modification or improvement. Another small demonstration of working with conditions as they are, rather than demanding they conform to preconceived ideas about how things should be arranged. As you develop skill with releasing small attachments, the monk continues, capacity for larger letting go naturally develops. Like physical exercise that gradually builds strength, releasing minor preferences trains the mind in non-attachment patterns that can eventually address more significant areas of clinging and control. The morning sun has reached sufficient height to warm the clearing, while leaving shaded areas cool, creating natural temperature variation that allows each person to find whatever level of warmth or coolness feels most comfortable. Even this simple environmental condition demonstrates how nature provides appropriately, without everyone needing identical circumstances to be content. What questions do you have about maintaining these teachings when you return to your ordinary life? Your teacher asks, settling more comfortably on his own log seat while maintaining the alert relaxation that characterizes all his positions and movements. The invitation creates space for exploring practical concerns rather than leaving the teachings as beautiful but potentially impractical ideals. You consider the various challenges that await your return. Relationships that trigger strong emotional reactions and habitual patterns of trying to change other people's behavior. Work situations that demand quick decisions without time for contemplative reflection. Cultural pressures that emphasize material success and accumulation rather than simplicity and letting go. Daily schedules that leave little time for the kind of extended meditation and reflection that supported learning here. The most important practice is remembering that letting go is always available as an option. He responds to your concerns with the gentle authority of someone who has successfully integrated these teachings into ordinary life, rather than maintaining them only in retreat conditions. No matter how complex or stressful circumstances become, you can always release your grip on demanding that things be different than they are. This doesn't mean becoming passive or failing to take appropriate action, but it means acting from wisdom rather than desperate clinging to particular outcomes. He suggests establishing simple daily reminders that can reconnect you with letting go. Practice without requiring extensive time or special conditions. Taking 3 conscious breaths before meals as practice in releasing control over the day's pace and productivity demands. Noticing moments when you're gripping something tightly, whether physically or mentally, and experimenting with softening that grip slightly. Ending each day by releasing any accumulated tensions or disappointments, rather than carrying them into sleep, where they can interfere with natural restoration. Also remember, he adds, his weathered hands resting peacefully in his lap as he speaks, that letting go is not a one-time achievement, but an ongoing practice that deepens gradually over years, rather than being mastered quickly through intensive effort. You will forget these teachings and become caught in old patterns of clinging and control. When you notice this happening, approach the recognition with compassion rather than self-criticism. This permission for imperfect practice feels liberating, removing the additional burden of expecting flawless implementation of letting go principles while still learning how they apply to complex real-world situations. The path includes moments of forgetting, naturally followed by remembering, periods of clinging that create suffering eventually followed by recognition and release. Simply recognizing attachment when it arises is already the beginning of letting go, your teacher emphasizes. You don't have to immediately release everything perfectly, just noticing, oh, I'm gripping this situation very tightly, or I'm demanding that this person behave differently than they are, creates enough space around the attachment for some natural softening to begin occurring. As morning progresses towards the time when you must begin preparing for departure, your teacher leads you back down the forest path toward the monastery buildings, each step carrying you gradually closer to the transition from this protected learning environment back to the complexity of ordinary existence. The path downward requires different attention than the upward climb, demonstrating another aspect of letting go practice. How to remain present and skillful as conditions change, rather than trying to maintain identical approaches regardless of shifting circumstances. Descending demands more careful attention to foot placement, different use of leg muscles, awareness of momentum and balance that differs from uphill movement. Even this simple walk demonstrates letting go, the monk observes as you navigate a steeper section where loose stones require extra care. We cannot walk downhill using exactly the same technique that worked for climbing up. We must release attachment to previous methods and respond appropriately to current conditions, while maintaining essential mindfulness and care for safety. By midday, you've returned to the monastery complex and completed the simple rituals that mark preparation for departure. Gathering your few belongings, expressing gratitude to community members who supported your learning through their presence and example, participating in a final, shared meal that honors both your time here and your transition back to life beyond these protected walls. The process of leaving becomes itself a final lesson in letting go, appreciating everything this place has offered while releasing attachment to staying longer, or demanding that insights remain unchanged when transplanted to different conditions, feeling gratitude for teachings received while not clinging to the particular forms through which wisdom was transmitted, acknowledging sadness about departure while not allowing that emotion to create resistance to natural transitions. Other monks appear as the time for departure approaches, offering simple farewells that honor the connection created through shared practice rather than formal social obligations that might feel forced or artificial. Some express appreciation through gentle nods that communicate volumes without requiring words. Others share brief phrases of encouragement that carry the weight of lived wisdom rather than empty pleasantries, all demonstrating how meaningful contact can occur between people without clinging to particular forms or demanding specific responses. Though your stay has been brief by monastery standards, the connections feel genuine and lasting, based on mutual commitment to understanding rather than personal chemistry or entertainment value. These relationships form through shared exploration of letting go, somehow feel more substantial than many connections that develop over years of casual social interaction without deeper purpose or spiritual foundation. Your teacher accompanies you to the monastery gate, where the path begins its descent toward the valley and eventual transportation back to your ordinary life. The morning has reached that perfect temperature where neither warmth nor coolness dominates awareness, creating conditions that support presence rather than distraction through physical discomfort or excessive comfort that might create attachment to pleasant sensations. As you return to your world, the monk says at the threshold between monastery grounds and the mountain path that leads back toward complexity, remember that these teachings on letting go aren't separate from ordinary life, but reveal its true nature when perceived clearly. Everything you encounter, from mundane tasks to profound challenges, offers opportunities for practicing release when approached with appropriate understanding. He places something small in your hand, a simple wooden bead worn smooth by years of handling, similar to those on prayer malas used by practitioners throughout various Buddhist traditions. The bead feels warm from his touch and perfectly sized for thumb and finger to hold without strain, a physical reminder designed for practical use rather than decorative display. This can serve as a reminder when you need it, he explains, his weathered fingers briefly covering your hand as he transfers this simple gift. Whenever you notice it in your pocket or see it on your shelf, take one conscious breath and practice letting go of whatever you're gripping too tightly in that moment. Not forcing release through will or effort, just softening your grip slightly and observing what happens naturally. The simple gift feels perfectly appropriate, not elaborate or precious in ways that might create attachment to the object itself, but meaningful as a practical tool for continued practice that can function in any environment or circumstance without drawing attention or requiring special conditions for use. Remember, your teacher says with a final bow that honors both your individual journey and the universal human quest for freedom from unnecessary suffering, everything you learned here was already present in your own experience. We simply pointed to what was always available, but perhaps not recognized clearly. The true teacher is your own willingness to let go when clinging creates suffering, your own capacity to soften when gripping creates tension, with gratitude that feels as natural as breathing and a slight sadness at leaving that somehow doesn't contradict the peace you found. You begin your journey back toward ordinary life, carrying these teachings on letting go into whatever conditions await your return. Each step down the mountain path becomes practice in releasing attachment to this monastery experience while maintaining the essential understanding it helped clarify. The descent proceeds slowly, not from reluctance to leave, but from natural carefulness required by the terrain and genuine appreciation for each stage of the transition. The path itself teaches letting go through requiring release of each step before the next can be taken, demonstrating through physical movement the essential rhythm of holding and releasing that governs all healthy processes. As monastery buildings disappear behind ascending ridges and curves in the path, you notice how the teachings remain vivid and accessible despite the loss of environmental support. Perhaps this demonstrates what the monk meant about true learning, insights that integrate so naturally into awareness that they don't depend on external reminders or special conditions to remain alive and functional. The wooden bead rests in your pocket, its presence noticeable without being intrusive, available for conscious use without demanding constant attention. Occasionally you touch it briefly, not as superstitious talisman, but as connection to the intention to practice letting go whenever life presents opportunities for release rather than clinging, acceptance rather than resistance. By midday, you reach the small village where your initial journey began, the settlement appearing unchanged, yet somehow perceived differently through eyes trained in letting go. The same buildings and pathways exist, yet you see them now as temporary arrangements subject to constant change, rather than fixed entities that should remain static to provide security and predictability. While waiting for transportation back to your regular life, you sit at a small cafe overlooking the village square, where ordinary activities unfold with the same eternal patterns that govern human communities everywhere. Merchants arranging their goods according to what they hope will attract customers. Children playing games whose rules shift naturally as conditions change. Elders sharing conversation on benches, worn smooth by countless previous occupants. Each person moves through their daily routines carrying their own mixture of joy and burden, their own attachments and occasional moments of natural letting go that occur without spiritual techniques or conscious practice. A young mother struggles with a crying child, her face showing the familiar combination of love and frustration that comes when caring deeply for someone whose behavior you cannot control through will or wisdom. You recognize this as a teaching opportunity that exists in every moment, how letting go of demanding that the child behave differently might create space for more creative and compassionate responses to the actual conditions she faces. Not abandoning appropriate care or becoming indifferent to the child's needs, but releasing the grip of expecting immediate quiet that creates additional stress for both mother and child. An elderly man feeds pigeons from a paper bag, his expression serene with simple pleasure that requires no elaborate spiritual framework to appreciate fully. The birds come and go according to their own timing and needs, accepting his offering without obligation to remain longer than feels appropriate or provide entertainment in return for food received. Neither the man nor the pigeons seem burdened by expectations about how long the feeding should continue, how grateful the birds should appear, or what the interaction should accomplish beyond the simple joy of sharing food with creatures who can benefit from the gift. It provides a perfect demonstration of generosity without attachment to outcomes, kindness without strings attached. Your transportation arrives, initiating the final phase of transition back to familiar territory. As rural landscapes gradually give way to suburban development and eventually urban environments, you notice how naturally the monastery teachings apply to changing conditions without requiring modification or compromise of essential principles. Instead of judging the increasing complexity and noise as inferior to monastery simplicity, you practice appreciating each environment for what it offers, while releasing attachment to having circumstances remain exactly as they were. The monastery taught letting go through optimal conditions designed to support such learning. Now comes the more challenging, but perhaps more valuable application. Maintaining this understanding amid pressures and distractions that often encourage clinging rather than release. Yet perhaps this is precisely the point that makes these teachings valuable, rather than merely exotic experiences available only in retreat settings. Wisdom that cannot function in ordinary circumstances serves little practical purpose for most people who must work, maintain relationships, meet responsibilities, and navigate complex social environments, rather than living in protected, contemplative communities. Hours pass as you travel deeper into familiar territory, each mile carrying you further from monastery simplicity toward the accumulated complexity of your own life. The wooden bead remains in your pocket, occasionally touched as reminder, but no longer needed as conscious prompt, because letting go has begun integrating into natural responses rather than remaining a special technique requiring deliberate application. Evening approaches as you finally arrive in your own neighborhood, your own street, your own familiar environment that appears simultaneously unchanged and subtly different. The physical surroundings remain exactly as you left them, yet your perception has been refined through days of practicing release, creating space to see these ordinary conditions with fresh appreciation, rather than taking them completely for granted. Entering your living space, you notice immediately the sheer quantity of objects surrounding you, not necessarily excessive by cultural standards, but startling after monastery simplicity, where every item served clear purpose and nothing accumulated without conscious intention. Each possession represents some form of attachment to comfort, security, identity, memory, or imagined future needs. These attachments aren't necessarily problematic in themselves, you realize, but they become sources of suffering when held with desperate clinging rather than light appreciation. The monastery didn't teach hatred of material objects, but rather a different way of relating to them, using what serves genuine well-being while releasing anxiety about loss, theft, or damage to things that can be replaced or lived without. You place the simple wooden bead on a small shelf where you'll encounter it regularly during daily activities. A physical reminder of teachings that must now prove themselves through practical application rather than retreat conditions. Then you settle into your familiar chair and take 3 conscious breaths, establishing presence in this moment of return rather than immediately planning improvements or organizing accumulated responsibilities. The first few days back pass quietly as you experiment with applying letting go teachings to routine activities and familiar challenges. Morning coffee becomes an opportunity to practice appreciation without clinging, enjoying each sip fully while releasing attachment to making the experience last longer than its natural duration, appreciating the warmth and flavor without demanding that future cups provide identical satisfaction. Work situations become occasions to notice when you're gripping solutions too tightly, trying to control outcomes beyond your actual influence, creating suffering through demanding that complex problems resolve quickly according to your preferred timelines. The letting go practice doesn't reduce your effectiveness or commitment to quality work, but it does reduce the additional stress created by attachment to having everything proceed exactly as planned. A particularly challenging conversation with a family member provides valuable practice in maintaining care while releasing control. Old patterns of emotional reactivity arise automatically when they express opinions you consider unwise or make choices you believe might harm their well-being or happiness. These familiar reactions feel like comfortable old clothes, well-worn grooves of response that require no conscious choice or creativity. Yet alongside the habitual frustration and urge to convince them of better alternatives, new awareness emerges, like morning light, gradually illuminating a familiar landscape. You recognize the possibility of loving them completely while releasing attachment to changing their mind, of offering perspective clearly without demanding it be accepted or implemented, of caring about their well-being without assuming responsibility for their choices. The conversation doesn't magically resolve all disagreements or eliminate the differences of opinion that triggered initial conflict. They remain free to consider or ignore your input according to their own judgment and life experience. But your relationship to these differences transforms through the simple practice of letting go, creating space for love to exist without the burden of having to control or fix what cannot be managed from outside their own decision-making process. You remain free to express concern and offer support while releasing the exhausting job of trying to manage another person's life through superior wisdom or more intense caring. They remain free to appreciate or dismiss your perspective without that response determining your fundamental regard for them as a human being worthy of respect and affection. Weeks pass as the monastery teachings continue integrating into daily experience through countless small applications rather than dramatic transformations. Progress proves non-linear rather than steadily upward. Some days bring clear insight and natural letting go that makes life feel effortless and spacious, while others revert to familiar patterns of clinging and control that create unnecessary friction and suffering. Yet even the forgetting becomes instructive when approached with compassion rather than self-criticism that would create additional suffering beyond whatever attachment initially caused difficulty. Each recognition of clinging offers a fresh opportunity to practice release without judgment about why the attachment arose or how long it persisted before being noticed. A work project fails despite careful planning and diligent effort, triggering initial reactions of disappointment and self-blame that feel as automatic as reflexes. These responses seem completely justified given the time and energy invested, the hopes attached to successful completion, the professional consequences that might follow from the failure to achieve expected results. Yet alongside these natural emotional responses, space emerges for investigating what conditions contributed to the outcome beyond your control or reasonable foresight. The failure, while genuinely disappointing and potentially costly, need not become personal proof of inadequacy or reason for extended suffering that serves no constructive purpose. It simply represents one outcome arising from complex conditions, most of which remain beyond any individual's complete management or prediction. Learning what can be learned from the experience while releasing attachment to having it turn out differently allows energy to flow toward more skillful future efforts, rather than being trapped in unproductive regret about unchangeable past events. Walking in a local park one evening as autumn begins, painting leaves in colors that demonstrate nature's perfect letting go, you encounter a scene that perfectly illustrates the teachings without requiring any spiritual interpretation or forced symbolism. An elderly woman sits on a bench feeding ducks at a small pond, her movements slow and deliberate, her expression peaceful in ways that suggest years of practice in finding contentment through simple activities. The ducks come and go according to their own patterns and needs, accepting food without obligation to provide entertainment, companionship, or gratitude in return for nourishment received. She offers what she has brought without demanding specific responses or becoming upset when certain ducks prove less interested than others in accepting her gifts. When the bread runs out and the ducks gradually disperse to other activities that serve their various needs, she watches their departure with the same peaceful attention she gave their arrival. No attempt to make them stay longer, no disappointment that the interaction has reached its natural conclusion, no anxiety about whether they'll return tomorrow for another feeding session. You approach the bench and ask if you might sit beside her for a few minutes, drawn by the quality of presence she demonstrates rather than any need for conversation or social connection. She welcomes your company with a gentle nod, and you sit together in comfortable silence, watching the pond's surface reflect evening light in patterns that shift constantly as slight breezes create ripples. "They know I'll be here tomorrow if I can manage it," she says eventually, speaking more to the pond than to you directly. "And if I can't come for some reason, they'll find food elsewhere or do whatever ducks do when people aren't feeding them. That's how life works best when you don't try to control everything or make it all about your own needs." Her simple wisdom echoes monastery teachings, translated into the language of everyday experience accessible to anyone, regardless of spiritual background or philosophical sophistication. This is perhaps how letting go naturally manifests when integrated into ordinary life, not through dramatic renunciation or exotic practices, but through countless small acts of releasing grip, softening demand, trusting life to unfold according to its own intelligence rather than personal preferences. As months pass following your monastery experience, you notice subtle but significant changes in how you approach various life situations that once created considerable stress or dissatisfaction. Relationships feel less burdensome when not filtered through constant expectations about how others should behave to meet your needs or validate your wisdom through compliance with your suggestions. Work becomes more creative and less stressful when not constrained by desperate attachment to specific outcomes that may or may not align with conditions beyond your influence. Projects flow more naturally when approached with commitment to quality and appropriate effort, while holding results lightly rather than gripping them with white-knuckled determination that often interferes with natural effectiveness. Even difficulties seem more manageable when met with curiosity about what they might teach, rather than immediate resistance to their existence or demands that they resolve quickly according to preferred timelines. This doesn't mean becoming passive in the face of problems that require action, but rather approaching challenges with the flexibility that comes from releasing attachment to having solutions emerge exactly as initially imagined. The wooden bead from the monastery rests on your shelf, no longer needed as conscious reminder, because letting go has become more natural than clinging in many areas of daily experience. You still have preferences and make plans and care deeply about outcomes that affect yourself and others, but these natural human activities now occur within a larger context of acceptance, rather than desperate need to control circumstances beyond your actual influence. One evening, while preparing dinner, you notice how completely absorbed you've become in the simple activity of chopping vegetables, the rhythmic motion of the knife finding its own natural pace, the fresh scents released by cutting through plant tissues, the satisfying transformation of whole ingredients into components that will combine into nourishment. This ordinary task has become meditative without effort or special spiritual techniques. The absorption feels natural rather than forced, emerging from present moment attention to what you're actually doing, rather than mental preoccupation with past events or future concerns that usually dominate consciousness during routine activities. Perhaps this demonstrates how letting go naturally infuses daily experience when not pursued as spiritual achievement, but simply practiced as sensible response to life's constant changes. The meal preparation continues with the same quality of presence, appreciating each ingredient for its unique contribution while not demanding that flavors blend, exactly according to previous successful attempts, allowing cooking times to vary slightly according to current conditions, rather than rigidly following recipes that may not account for differences in stove temperature or ingredient freshness. Even cleaning dishes afterward maintains this natural mindfulness, feeling the warm water and soap creating cleansing conditions, noticing how easy it becomes to remove food residues when soaking time and scrubbing pressure work together appropriately, appreciating the satisfaction that comes from completing this simple task thoroughly without rushing toward other activities that might seem more important or interesting. These ordinary activities demonstrate how letting go expresses itself through daily life when integrated naturally, rather than applied as special technique requiring conscious effort or spiritual framework. The teachings have become like breathing, so essential and automatic that they operate below conscious awareness while supporting everything else that occurs. Later that evening, sitting quietly as day transitions toward night, you reflect on how profoundly your relationship with experience has shifted since those days at the mountain monastery. External circumstances remain largely similar. Same living situation, same job responsibilities, many of the same relationships and daily activities that comprised your life before learning about letting go through direct practice. Yet, your approach to these familiar conditions has transformed through the simple cultivation of releasing attachment to having things be different than they are. This doesn't mean becoming passive or ceasing to work toward positive change when action seems appropriate, but rather engaging with life from wisdom, rather than desperate, clinging to outcomes beyond your control. You still take appropriate action when situations call for response, still express preferences and work toward goals that seem worthwhile, still care deeply about results that affect yourself and others. But these natural human activities now occur within a foundation of acceptance that prevents the additional suffering created by demanding that reality conform to personal preferences, regardless of conditions that may make such conformity impossible or inappropriate. As you prepare for sleep on this ordinary evening, months after your monastery experience, you recognize how naturally letting go has woven itself into the fabric of daily existence. Not as exotic spiritual practice requiring special conditions or elaborate techniques, but as the natural response of wisdom to life's constant changes and challenges that cannot be controlled through will or effort alone. Sleep approaches gradually as you release the day's accumulated experiences, appreciating what went well without clinging to pleasant moments that have already passed into memory, acknowledging difficulties without carrying them into rest where they might interfere with natural restoration processes, allowing your body to find whatever position provides appropriate comfort without demanding perfect ease or ideal conditions. Even the transition from wakefulness to sleep becomes another opportunity to practice letting go, releasing conscious control while trusting natural processes to provide whatever rest and renewal your body requires, without supervision or improvement efforts from your well-meaning, but ultimately unnecessary, conscious management. Your breathing naturally slows as you settle deeper into relaxation, each exhale becoming a small letting go, releasing tensions held in muscles you didn't realize were contracted, releasing thoughts that want to continue processing the day's events or planning tomorrow's activities, releasing any anxiety about how sleep should occur or how tomorrow should unfold according to your preferences. The simple wooden bead sits quietly on its shelf, no longer needed as reminder, because letting go has become as natural as breathing, as automatic as the heart beating, as effortless as the countless physiological processes that sustain life without requiring conscious direction or constant monitoring for proper function. Dreams, when they arise during the night, feel lighter and less emotionally compelling than in previous years, when sleep often became another arena for struggling with unresolved issues or rehearsing anxious scenarios about imaginary future problems. The day's practice of not clinging to experiences extends naturally into sleep states, allowing dream narratives to flow without demanding they make sense or provide specific insights about waking concerns. Sleep itself becomes deeper and more restorative when approached as another form of letting go, rather than unconscious battle with whatever tensions or worries might have accumulated during daytime activities. The body knows how to rest and restore itself when not interfered with by mental efforts to control or improve natural processes that function optimally when left alone. And if you find yourself awakening during the night, as occasionally happens with changing seasons or minor physical discomforts, you can practice letting go even then, releasing attachment to uninterrupted sleep, appreciating whatever rest you've already received without demanding more, allowing your body to find whatever position feels most comfortable without forcing perfect ease. These middle-of-the-night awakenings become opportunities for gentle practice rather than sources of frustration about disrupted sleep patterns or anxiety about being tired tomorrow. You can lie quietly appreciating the silence and darkness, perhaps noticing stars visible through your window or listening to subtle night sounds that usually pass unnoticed during busy daytime hours. Morning will arrive when conditions naturally support the transition from sleep to wakefulness, bringing another day of opportunities to practice letting go through ordinary activities and unexpected challenges. But for now, in this peaceful time of settling toward rest, you can simply be held by the natural wisdom that has sustained you through every night of sleep you've ever experienced. The teachings continue working within you, even as conscious awareness settles towards sleep, integrating at levels deeper than thought or intention. Your body knows how to rest without your management. Your breath continues its natural rhythm without conscious control. Your heart maintains its steady beating through all cycles of activity and rest, waking and sleeping, without requiring supervision or improvement efforts. Let go of needing to understand exactly how these natural processes work so perfectly without your conscious participation. Let go of monitoring your progress towards sleep or evaluating how well you're practicing. Letting go. Let go of any remaining tensions from the day, any concerns about tomorrow's responsibilities, any expectations about how this night's rest should unfold according to your preferences. Simply allow yourself to be supported by the natural intelligence that governs all healthy processes, that moves the seasons in their eternal cycles, that guides birds in their migrations, that causes flowers to bloom when conditions are appropriate and seeds to sprout when the time arrives for new growth. Everything arises and passes according to conditions that arrange themselves through wisdom, far more complex and reliable than any individual understanding could encompass or direct. Even this moment of settling towards sleep emerges from specific causes, physical tiredness accumulated through the day's activities, mental relaxation supported by letting go practice, appropriate environment that supports rest, the natural rhythm that calls all living beings toward the restoration that sleep provides. You need not create these conditions or improve upon their natural functioning. They unfold according to their own perfect timing, supporting your rest through ancient biological wisdom that requires no conscious supervision or enhancement efforts. Trust this process that has carried you safely through every night of your life, that will continue operating reliably, regardless of whether you understand or attempt to control its mechanisms. And if thoughts continue arising as you settle deeper towards sleep, you can practice letting go with them as well, noticing each mental activity without being captured by its story or emotional charge, allowing thinking to continue its natural flow without resistance that might create tension or pursuit, that might create stimulation, trusting that mental activity will naturally quiet as sleep approaches, regardless of your attempts to force or prevent this settling. Let go of doing anything about anything that might be occurring in your experience. Let go of fixing, improving, or perfecting any aspect of this moment of transition toward rest. Let go of analyzing how successfully you're letting go, or whether you're applying the teachings correctly according to some imagined standard of spiritual performance. Simply rest in the natural contentment that emerges when you stop demanding that experience be different than it is, when you release the enormous effort required to control what functions best when allowed to unfold according to its own intelligence and timing. Your body settles more deeply into whatever position provides appropriate support, without forcing ideal comfort or demanding perfect ease. Your breathing continues its natural rhythm, sometimes deeper, sometimes more shallow, always perfectly suited to current conditions without requiring guidance or improvement from conscious intention. The sounds around you, whether profound silence or subtle night noises, simply exist as they are without needing your evaluation, adjustment, or preference about what the auditory environment should provide for optimal sleep conditions. Everything belongs exactly as it is in this moment of natural transition toward rest. The monastery teachings have become part of you now, not as foreign concepts requiring effort to remember or apply, but as natural wisdom expressing itself through how you meet each experience with less resistance and more acceptance. Letting go happens as naturally as releasing each breath to make space for the next inhalation, as effortlessly as allowing each day to complete itself so the next can begin fresh. And so you rest now, cradled by this understanding, supported by the natural processes that have sustained life through millions of years of evolution, held by the same intelligence that moves rivers toward oceans, that guides planetary rotation around distant stars, that coordinates the countless biological functions occurring in your body without requiring conscious management or concern. Let go into this vast holding, this perfect support that asks nothing of you, but provides everything necessary for rest and renewal. Let go into the deep peace that comes when you finally release the exhausting effort of trying to control what cannot be controlled, manage what functions perfectly without management, improve what is already complete and whole exactly as it is. Sleep comes now, natural and inevitable as sunrise following darkness, as gentle and unhurried as mountain mist settling into protected valleys, where it will rest until morning warmth calls it back towards sky. You need do nothing but allow this transition. Need grasp nothing but can release everything. Need control nothing but can trust the wisdom that has carried you safely through every night of rest you've ever experienced. Let go of everything now. Let go completely and finally. Rest in the natural peace that is always available when you stop demanding that this moment be anything other than exactly what it is. The teachings live in you now, not as memories requiring maintenance, but as present reality, expressing themselves through each breath, each heartbeat, each moment of releasing into the vast, gentle intelligence that surrounds and sustains all existence. Everything unfolds according to conditions that arrange themselves through wisdom more ancient and reliable than any individual understanding. Even this sleep arises naturally when all supporting factors align. Tired body seeking restoration, peaceful mind released from the day's concerns, safe environment that supports rest, appropriate timing that follows natural rhythms of activity and recovery. You need not create these conditions or manage their unfolding. They coordinate themselves according to the same intelligence that governs all natural processes, requiring only your willingness to let go and allow what wants to happen to occur in its own perfect timing, without interference from well-meaning but unnecessary conscious direction. And so you let go now completely and trustingly into the deep rest that comes when all effort ceases, when all control is released, when all clinging dissolves into the natural flow of life, expressing itself through cycles of consciousness and unconsciousness, activity and rest, holding and releasing that have sustained you since birth and will carry you gently through this night into whatever tomorrow may bring. Let go of everything. Rest in the vast peace of nothing needing to be different than it is. Trust the perfect intelligence that requires no management from you to provide exactly what serves your highest well-being in each moment, including this moment of transition into deep, restorative, peaceful sleep that comes naturally when all resistance ends, and complete letting go allows rest to arrive in its own time and way. Now, let us explore some ancient Buddhist stories about letting go. This teaching comes to us through the ancient wisdom of those who observed both human nature and the natural world with equal clarity. In the tropical forests of Southeast Asia, where coconut palms sway in the ocean breeze and monkeys chatter among the emerald canopy, local hunters developed an ingenious method for capturing these agile creatures. The technique required no violence, no speed, and no superior strength. Instead, it relied upon understanding a fundamental aspect of the monkey's nature that would become its undoing. The hunters would select a coconut and carefully hollow out its interior through a small opening, leaving just enough space for their trap. Into this hollow chamber, they would place a handful of sweet rice, its aroma irresistible to any hungry monkey. The opening was crafted with precise dimensions, large enough for a monkey's open hand to reach inside, but too small for a clenched fist to withdraw. When a curious monkey discovered this strange coconut attached to a tree, it would investigate by reaching inside for the rice. The moment its fingers closed around the grains, it became trapped, not by any external force, but by its own unwillingness to release what it had grasped. The monkey could have freed itself instantly simply by opening its hand and letting go of the rice. But this solution seemed impossible from within its limited perspective. The hunters would find these monkeys sitting by their traps, sometimes for hours, pulling frantically at their trapped hands while refusing to release the very thing that held them captive. The rice that had promised nourishment became the source of their captivity. Their natural intelligence, so evident in other situations, seemed to abandon them when faced with the simple choice between holding on and letting go. What made this trap so effective wasn't its physical construction but its psychological design. It transformed the monkey's own grasping nature into the mechanism of its capture. The stronger the monkey pulled, the more trapped it became. The tighter it gripped the rice, the more impossible escape appeared. The Buddha taught, "You only lose what you cling to." This profound teaching points directly to the monkey's predicament and our own. The story illuminates how our attachments, no matter how seemingly small or justified, can become the very prisons that limit our freedom. Why do we hold so tightly to things that ultimately constrain our movement through life? Buddhist psychology identifies this pattern as the root of much human suffering. Our minds, like the monkey's instincts, are conditioned to grasp what appears beneficial and hold on regardless of consequences. We close our mental fists around possessions, relationships, identities, opinions, and even spiritual experiences, believing that our security depends on our grip strength. This grasping operates across every dimension of human experience. We cling to past versions of ourselves that no longer serve our growth. We hold on to resentments that poison our present happiness. We grasp at relationships beyond their natural seasons. We clutch at achievements and possessions as if they could provide lasting security. We even grip our spiritual insights so tightly that they become obstacles to further awakening. The coconut trap reveals how what we think will nourish us can become what confines us. The rice represents all those things we convince ourselves we cannot live without. Perhaps it's a particular lifestyle, a specific role or identity, a certain level of comfort, or even an image of how our spiritual journey should unfold. Like the monkey, we often cannot see that our freedom lies in simply opening our hand. Master Huang Po taught, "Nothing is gained by addition, nothing is lost by subtraction." This points to the liberating truth that our essential nature cannot be enhanced by accumulating things or diminished by releasing them. The monkey's true nature isn't improved by possessing rice, yet its conditioning makes release feel like loss rather than relief. Consider the coconut traps in your own life. What are you gripping so tightly that it prevents you from moving freely? Perhaps it's a job that no longer brings joy, but provides familiar security. Maybe it's a grudge that feels justified but weighs down your heart. It could be an image of yourself that once served you but now constrains your evolution. The practice of letting go doesn't mean becoming passive or uncaring. It means holding our preferences lightly, like water cupped in open palms rather than ice gripped in closed fists. When we release our desperate grasp on outcomes, we often discover that what we truly need flows toward us more naturally. Zen teacher Alan Watts observed that we suffer most when we confuse our maps with the territory, our concepts about life with life itself. The monkey cannot eat the concept of rice, yet it sacrifices its freedom for the illusion of possession. Similarly, we often sacrifice our peace for mental objects that exist more in our imagination than in reality. Tonight, as you notice the various things your mind tells you that you cannot release, can you experiment with gently opening your hand? Perhaps you'll find that letting go doesn't mean losing what matters, but discovering what freedom feels like. As the Buddha reminded us, in the end, just three things matter: how well we have lived, how well we have loved, how well we have learned to let go. The coconut trap teaches us that sometimes the greatest strength lies in knowing when to open our grasp. Let us now turn to a tale about the courage to trust life's current. This is the story of the Crystal River. In the depths of a great crystal river, where water flowed clear as mountain air, there lived an entire village of small creatures. The river's current moved above them like a gentle breath, carrying the wisdom of countless springs and distant seas. Young and old, rich and poor, all made their home along the sandy bottom, each creature grasping tightly to stones, branches, and roots. For generations, clinging had been their way of survival. Every creature learned from birth to wrap their appendages around river rocks and fallen wood. "Hold on," the elders would say. "The current is dangerous. It will sweep you away to places unknown. Safety lies in staying exactly where you are." But one small creature grew weary of this endless grasping. Day after day, he watched the current flow overhead, seeing how it moved with such purpose and grace. While his neighbors complained about the effort required to maintain their grip, he found himself wondering what it might feel like to trust that flowing water. "I am tired of clinging," he announced one morning. "Though I cannot see where it leads, I trust that the current knows its destination. I shall let go and allow it to carry me where it will, for I fear that if I continue clinging, I shall die of boredom before I ever truly live." The other creatures gasped in horror. "Fool!" they cried. "Let go, and that current will tumble you mercilessly across the rocks below. You will be battered and broken, dying far more quickly than any boredom could kill you." But the small creature had made his decision. Taking one last look at his neighbors, he released his grip on the familiar stone. Immediately, the current seized him, and just as the others had predicted, he was tumbled and tossed across the rocky bottom. His small body struck stone after stone, each impact bringing pain he had never experienced while safely clinging. Yet something remarkable began to happen. As the creature continued to surrender to the current's power, refusing to grab for new anchors despite his pain, the water gradually lifted him higher from the dangerous bottom. The tumbling ceased. The rocks could no longer reach him. Now he flowed with the current itself, no longer fighting its direction, but becoming one with its movement. As he traveled downstream, creatures in distant parts witnessed something they had never seen. Here was one of their own kind, yet he appeared to be flying through the water, moving with the elegant power of the current itself. "See a miracle!" they called out. "A creature like ourselves, yet he soars. Surely he is the Messiah, come to save us all." The flowing creature heard their cries and felt compassion for their misunderstanding. "I am no more Messiah than any of you," he called back. "The river delights in lifting us all free, if only we dare to let go. Our true work is not clinging to the bottom, but embracing this voyage, this grand adventure of trust and flow." But the creatures only cried louder, "Savior, Savior!" Even as they spoke, they tightened their grips on rocks and roots. They watched until he disappeared around a bend, then began weaving legends about the miraculous savior who had briefly graced their village. Buddha's wisdom reminds us, you only lose what you cling to. This ancient teaching illuminates the profound paradox at the heart of human experience. We spend our lives grasping for security and control, believing that our safety depends on holding tight to familiar circumstances. Yet in this very grasping, we create the suffering we seek to avoid. Why do we cling so desperately when the current offers to carry us toward unknown adventures? Zen Buddhism reveals that from early childhood, we learn the known is safe and the unknown dangerous. This conditioning becomes a spiritual obstacle when it prevents growth beyond familiar limitations. We also suffer from the illusion of control, believing that by grasping circumstances, relationships, and identities, we can stop the natural flow of change. This creates enormous tension because it puts us in opposition to reality itself. Life is constant movement, and when we resist this truth, we exhaust ourselves fighting currents far more powerful than our individual will. Consider the areas of your life where you find yourself clinging. Perhaps it's a relationship that has outgrown its original form, a career that no longer brings joy, or an image of yourself that now constrains your growth. The current of change will flow whether we resist it or not. Our choice is whether to exhaust ourselves in futile opposition or discover the grace available in conscious surrender. The Buddha said, "Nothing is permanent except change. Water doesn't fight the mountainside. It finds the natural pathway down." When we learn to move with life's current rather than against it, we discover effortless effectiveness that rigid resistance can never achieve. Tonight, as you rest in this moment's stillness, what might you be ready to release? Perhaps it's a worry about tomorrow's challenges, a resentment from yesterday's disappointments, or a way of defining yourself that has grown too small. Can you feel into the current of this moment's aliveness and trust its direction? As the Buddha taught, let go of what has passed. Let go of what may come. Let go of what is happening now. Relax right now and rest. In this trust, we discover that the current we feared would destroy us is actually the very force that can carry us home to our true nature. Let us keep going on our journey. The following story reveals the difference between helping and holding on. This is the lesson of the two monks and the woman at the river. Two monks were traveling together along a mountain path, making their way to a distant monastery where they planned to continue their studies. Both were dedicated practitioners who had taken strict vows as part of their spiritual training, including a vow to avoid all physical contact with women. This wasn't born from disrespect, but from their understanding that such discipline helped maintain focus on their spiritual development. As they approached a swollen river where the usual bridge had been damaged by recent storms, they encountered a young woman standing uncertainly at the water's edge. The current was strong and treacherous, filled with debris from the mountain runoff, and she was clearly afraid to attempt crossing alone. "Please, honored monks," she called to them, "could one of you help me cross this dangerous water? I'm not strong enough to make it safely on my own." One of the monks immediately tensed, his mind racing through their monastic rules and the potential complications of this situation. Physical contact with women was explicitly forbidden, and he began formulating explanations for why they couldn't help. Perhaps suggestions for alternative solutions that wouldn't require breaking their vows. The other monk, however, took one look at the woman's predicament and the genuine danger she faced and made a different choice. Without hesitation or lengthy deliberation, he walked to her side and gently lifted her onto his shoulders. He carried her carefully across the treacherous current, ensuring her safety with each step, and set her down gently on the far bank. "Thank you so much," she said gratefully, bowing to both monks before continuing on her way. The two monks resumed their journey, but the atmosphere between them had changed dramatically. The first monk walked in increasingly agitated silence, his mind churning with thoughts about what he had witnessed. As the hours passed, his internal tension grew until finally he could no longer contain his distress. "Brother," he burst out, unable to hold his silence any longer, "I cannot understand your behavior back at the river. Our spiritual training explicitly teaches us to avoid any physical contact with women. Yet you picked that woman up onto your shoulders and carried her across the water. How could you so blatantly violate our sacred vows?" His companion looked at him with gentle surprise and responded with perfect simplicity. "Brother, I set her down on the other side of the river hours ago, but you are still carrying her." Buddha's wisdom teaches us, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. This tale unveils the profound difference between compassionate action and mental attachment, between responding to present needs and carrying past events. Why do we often carry situations long after they've ended, replaying scenarios and nursing grievances that only exist in our own minds? Zen Buddhism reveals that much of our suffering comes not from what happens to us, but from our inability to release experiences once they've passed. The first monk's agitation demonstrates how rigid adherence to rules can sometimes conflict with the compassionate spirit that inspired those rules originally. His fellow monk saw a person in danger and responded with immediate kindness, then completely released the incident. But the first monk carried the event for hours, letting it grow heavier with each step. Consider your own tendency to replay past conversations, nurse old grievances, or mentally rehearse scenarios that have already ended. How much of your mental energy goes toward carrying situations that exist now only in memory? The woman crossed the river in minutes, but the monk carried her for hours through his own thoughts. This teaching applies to far more than dramatic violations of rules. We carry harsh words someone spoke years ago, mistakes we made decades past, embarrassing moments that no one else even remembers. Meanwhile, the present moment, rich with possibility and actual experience, goes unnoticed because we're too busy carrying ghosts from the past. In Zen practice, we learn to distinguish between appropriate action and unnecessary attachment. The second monk helped when help was needed, then moved on completely. He didn't dwell on whether he'd made the right choice, worry about others' opinions, or replay the incident endlessly in his mind. Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh taught, thanks to impermanence, everything is possible. The river crossing was impermanent. It began, served its purpose, and ended. Only the first monk's attachment to the event gave it ongoing existence in the form of mental suffering. The Buddha said, "Let go of what has passed. Let go of what may come. Let go of what is happening now. Don't try to figure anything out. Don't try to make anything happen. Relax, right now, and rest." This teaching points directly to the freedom available when we stop carrying experiences beyond their natural lifespan. Look deeply at what you might be carrying unnecessarily. Old resentments, past failures, conversations that upset you, decisions you regret. All of these exist now only because you continue to pick them up and carry them. What would it feel like to set them down? The irony is profound. The monk who actually broke the rule experienced no suffering from it, while the monk who maintained perfect rule observance created hours of agitation for himself. This reveals that suffering often comes not from our actions, but from our thoughts about our actions. Tonight, as you notice your mind returning to past events, old grievances, or situations that have already ended, can you remember the wise monk's example? Can you practice setting down whatever you've been carrying unnecessarily, discovering the lightness that comes from traveling through life without the burden of yesterday's experiences? As Buddha's wisdom reminds us, in the end, only three things matter: how well we have lived, how well we have loved, how well we have learned to let go. True spiritual practice isn't about perfect rule following, but about responding appropriately to what's actually present, then releasing it completely to make space for whatever comes next. As we complete this journey together, from the misty mountain monastery back to the quiet sanctuary of this present moment, you carry within you the timeless wisdom of letting go. What began as teachings heard in an ancient hall has become living understanding woven into the fabric of your awareness. The monk's gentle guidance, the lotus flowers releasing their petals, the simple wooden bead worn smooth by countless hands. These were never separate from your own innate capacity for freedom. You've discovered that letting go isn't about becoming empty or indifferent, but about becoming spacious enough to hold all of life's experiences with grace. Like water flowing around stones, you can now move through challenges without the resistance that creates unnecessary suffering. The breath that naturally releases to make space for the next inhalation, the seasons that surrender one form to birth another, the sunset that lets go into darkness so dawn can emerge. You are part of this same intelligent rhythm. In your daily life, when old patterns of clinging arise, remember the monastery's teaching. You need not force release, only soften your grip and trust what wants to unfold. Each moment offers fresh opportunity to practice this ancient art. Whether washing dishes or navigating difficult conversations, feeding birds or simply breathing, life itself becomes your teacher in the sublime practice of letting go. Rest now in this understanding that has become as natural as your own heartbeat. Let go of the day's accumulated tensions, tomorrow's imagined burdens, and any need to carry what serves no purpose. You are held by the same vast intelligence that moves the stars and guides the rivers to the sea. In letting go of everything, you discover you lose nothing essential and gain the infinite peace that was always your true nature. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Sleepy Monk.